perdón, en español. Pero mi marido me dijo mejor no, porque después todos van a tener dolor de cabeza. Entonces empiezo en inglés. So I'm Haralampieva. I work at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development in London. And I'm responsible for our engagement with clients on sustainability. Our focus is climate change as one of the most material issues for our clients. But increasingly, we see the demand for a broader sustainability advice. And today, I would like to talk to you and hear also from you about your experience about ESG. So what Andres mentioned, and I would like to relate to you very much, is now you may remember back in the day when ESG was very much about ticking the boxes. It was about compliance. It was about diversity meeting when only 3 members of staff showed up, or about reducing paper in the printing room. But these days are long gone. It's not about compliance now. It's really about reimagining our business, reinventing the business, transforming the business in order to create value for the business, for the shareholders, and for the consumers, investors, for all the stakeholders. So let's move on to the first slide. But first, let's start by saying, ESG has gone through the hype, has gone through the lows. It's really about finding what are those material sustainability factors for your business. So environment, it's really about carbon emissions, it's about energy consumption, it's about water management. S is about the people, about your staff, about your consumers. It's really how you integrate their concerns into your business. And G is for governance. This is the structure. This is how a business is run, right? How do we embed all those important characteristics into policies, into practices, into information that we provide to investors? So these are the triple lens that we've heard over and over again. But I think beyond those concepts, I would like us to move into to provide you a landscape of what has happened over the last couple of years. So ESG is really not about compliance now. It has very much turned into a business strategy. Now, Andres mentioned the European directives, European legislation. I think it's very important, me as a lawyer, to start from the legal provision and the policy commitments at the European Commission. Of course, the EU Green Deal is there. And the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which last year we expected that it will immediately cover, or over a phased-in period, but up to 50,000 companies. Now the scope has been reduced possibly to about 10,000 companies. But what I want to emphasize here is that the direction is clear. So those 10,000 companies will be the business leaders. Those 10,000 companies will request information from their business partners, from their suppliers. So this will have an impact not only on the EU market, this will have an impact on all their business leader supply chains beyond Europe and beyond the European borders. We have now, so I was personally involved as a working group in the development of the ESRSs, and now there is a process of recalibrating them, so they're not onerous, they're not too costly on businesses. The CSDDD and SFDR are also at the moment under deliberation. So what I would like to emphasize here is that the direction of the Commission remains clear. Yeah? This is about green value. This is about making the continent a carbon neutral continent. But not while sustainability was probably the one solid pillar. Now there is another pillar, and this is competitiveness. The competitiveness agenda is really important because businesses need to be competitive. And so sustainability, we don't really strive for sustainability only for the benefit of the planet. But in order to make sure that, that your business is competitive, it aligns to the values of your investors, of your customers, of the staff and the young generation that you're planning to employ. So this very, very kind of core thinking is reflected into the key regulatory instruments and policies, the EU Omnibus that you have heard a lot, and I'm not going to spend time on that, but also the Clean Industrial Act. Yeah? The Clean Industrial Act for us as a bank is very important because it reaffirms the commitment of the Commission to decarbonize manufacturing, to invest in clean production. The Commission has committed up 100 billion euros for this act. So our industry specialists and sustainability advisors have not really changed the course. And the other one which is coming is the Circular Economy Act, which I think is a very core part of this mindset of not living for the day, but being responsible for the products that we consume, for the products that we produce, and integrating it into a positive kind of virtuous circle. So the key points I would like to make here is that the direction remains the same. There is a core commitment into accelerated decarbonization with funding committed to it. There is also this renewed commitment into circularity. But ultimately, all the compliance kind of exercise is focused on businesses becoming more sustainable, but also with less burden on them, being more effective, the regulatory requirements, and proportionate, so not affecting disproportionately SMEs. With this, I would like to switch to the kind of the more international perspective. If we can keep back the previous slide, please. Thank you. And what I wanted here to kind of provide a snapshot of some of those acronyms, right? GRI, so we have been working with businesses, not only in Europe, but across more than 40 jurisdictions in emerging frontier markets. The GRI has been kind of quite an important engagement mechanisms for us. And we have expected for years businesses to start thinking also about double materiality, like what is really important for not only for their shareholders, but broadly for the planet and for the environment. TCFD, you're familiar with, it's been now subsumed by ISSB. And ISSB, while a couple of years ago when it was introduced, the sustainability standards under the IFRS, was a niche initiative. It actually aims to become a global baseline for climate-related disclosures. And we are working very closely with the board and with the experts. We actually will be the first MDB to report in line with ISSB later this year. So why we have chosen that? I mean, this is just to step aside and give you our personal perspective. Because we are a green bank, and we believe that we need to lead. We need to establish good practices. What we have learned is that ISSB has created standards, right? S1, S2, I'm not going to detail that, but the standards are abstract until they are good practices, until they are guidance of how businesses should implement them. And this is really important. Now, in addition to our corporate commitment to ISSB, we work very closely with businesses in Turkey, with businesses in Egypt, with banks and corporates and manufacturing. And frankly speaking, I see how the narrative has changed. 2-3 years ago, we struggled to make the case for actually sustainability reporting, for integration between the functions, for reinventing really and identifying what is the business value of being more sustainable and for of listening also to your consumers. But now the demand has grown substantially. The demand for businesses to not not to necessarily push boundaries, but to lead together in association with either their investors or with, members from their supply chains. It is really important. So we have started working in parallel on these two processes, actually three, working closely with standard setters, helping to lead the way by setting good practices for our sustainability reporting in line with ISSB, but also supporting those businesses, helping them navigate and start from, depending on what's material, but usually climate is leading, start in identifying what are the tools, what are the methodologies that they need to adopt, what are the functions, what are the reporting lines, right? So this is very much, we call it counterparty engagement, rather than following use of proceeds, rather than following where our funding is going into what product. It's really taking a very focused approach on your counterparty, on your client, as an institution. What the cultures, what are the values, how those values are supported by the governance mechanism. So back on ISSB, 2 years now, more than 38 jurisdictions have adopted or expressed plans to adopt ISSB. Yeah? So we can shift here a bit the gaze to Asia. Japan has committed that they will become an ISSB aligned kind of jurisdiction. Brazil last year, Hong Kong, Singapore through their stock exchanges, and also as we are also expanding into sub-Saharan Africa, Kenya, Nigeria are also adopting ISSB. So that will become a global reference point, a global baseline for businesses striving into more kind of interoperability and consistency of the produced data. Now let's move on to the next slide. So we can look at ESG now back and as a value driver really, which is quite important. It's not, as I mentioned, a feel-good initiative. It's very much about smart risk management, about smart businesses. So the data, regardless of what the trigger for ESG reporting is, whether it's voluntary, whether it's mandatory, whether it's driven by the organization, these data, once collected, once assessed, this data holds a substantial strategic value to the business. That can really benefit the company in the long run. So now, yes, you will tell me, well, but it's hard. It is hard. The first year is very hard. I'm not going to quote here the budgets we have also heard from consultants about assisting businesses. It is hard because we're breaking the status quo, because we are establishing connections between functions and interreliance between internal functions that have not spoken to each other before. And this is hard because we are embedding executive accountability for ESG. And this is hard. And because down the line, as a business, you're responsible for the information that you provide to investors, right? And I would like here to open the bracket and say, yes, but it's better to be amongst the front runners than to be amongst the ones that are lagging behind. And also because of potential liability, right? Because the first, and we have seen this also how the European standards have stepped back, and also ISSB on certain commitments now they're discussing some possible kind of remedial measures. The first companies that are transparent about their sustainability, they will be able to use kind of really, I would say, not only the goodwill of the public, but very much they will be able to use these mitigants, right? As to, there is not that much data, I'm doing my first trial. We are kind of leading the way here. And we have seen this as well in the CSRD, for example, when the Commission said, no reasonable assurance for now, limited assurance, but delayed. And we've seen this in ISSB, we've seen in other standards as well, and local taxonomies in Turkey and in other countries. So first, what does this data really reveal about the strategy, about the risks and the competitiveness of the business? So first is really ESG, this data, once it's produced in a format that is useful for the functions and for the senior management, it helps to manage risks. This ranges from understanding what are your climate vulnerabilities, especially important for emerging markets, understanding what are the possible supply chain disruptions, and you know better that this is a very difficult topic to manage now, both influenced by geopolitics, influenced by climate change, influenced by a number of other factors, but also governance failures. Yeah? So understanding those problems early on will help to develop proactive risk management tools. And before those material ESG risks turn into legal, financial, operational failures, businesses can manage them. I think that's the critical thing. It's not ESG kind of in isolation, different universe. No, this is basically, you have a focused vision on what are those factors that would cause disruptions, that will cause operational problems, so you can take steps before they materialize, before they escalate. In insurance business, for example, it's estimated that 43% of the global economic losses are uninsured. Now, in some of the markets that we operate, 60% of the losses are uninsured. We've also heard about the difficulties for insurers now because of the unpredictability of climate change and the difficulties to insure even that percentage, right? So you know then what's the impact on financing a project, the impact on financing a business when you cannot expand and insure. Maybe the next slide. This is just to highlight the managing risks. Now we can identify opportunities, yeah? So the ESG as well, when you focus on those ESG factors, if we can move on to the next, highlight it, yeah. So this is really to identify what are those untapped opportunities. What are the unmet needs? What are really the untapped value across the supply chains? We have programs where we work with companies on their ESG kind of awareness, reporting, followed up by investment in those factors or in those ESG led businesses or improvements or technologies that will lead to a better resilience of the business. So that data, of course, leads to improved decision making. Yeah? So powering these decisions with data, aligning the broader group of stakeholders with the purpose. This is about aligning really critical, this internal decision making and ensuring that the financial and the sustainability objectives are met. And this is a very difficult exercise, right? Because ISSB is asking for eventually convergence with the financial reporting, sustainability reporting. It is difficult. We're going through that process because, starting with the lack of data, right? So the lack of data that could help you predict what of those matters will become eventually financially material to you. But it's a process, yeah? We are all on this journey. The next one, which is unlocking finance, this is what banks such as ours are focused, like impact investors. When you go through this, identification and mitigation of potentially ESG material risks, then you demonstrate your accountability as a business, your foresightedness. This helps, of course, reinforce brand reputation. It brings the trust of investors. And there are a number of sustainable finance instruments that are on the rise now and that we invest in. Sustainable linked loans, green bonds, and other incentives-based instruments. And you probably know that for 2024, the sustainable fund investments, it's been close to $3 billion US globally. So this is not something that anyone can ignore. The raising stakeholders' trust, I think we mentioned that, and that's especially important for large businesses, for businesses that want to lead with purpose, who would like to strengthen reputation, and would like to operate across different jurisdictions. It's quite important, right? Because another point that I would like to make is that we've seen a number of various frameworks and disclosure requirements. The reality is that even if reporting could be different or frameworks could differ amongst each other, if as a business you start collecting, if you start presenting this data, you'll become regulation kind of proof. So you'll be able to operate across businesses. So there is this trend towards much more interoperability between standards, and we have seen it both now, ESRS and ISSB finally working on an interoperability standards. So we can move to the next slides here, some examples I would like to bring to your attention. Let's start with the more kind of big companies, businesses in Denmark. The Ørsted company, which was one of Europe's most coal-intensive companies, 99% dependent on coal, which has now transformed into a global leader of offshore wind. Yeah, so this was really driven by an executive-level net zero ambition, by ESG strategy that permeated through the levels of management down to the very operational person. And it was also kind of incentivized by remuneration package. So that's a very successful business that has really tapped into these green opportunities that we mentioned about. The other one, we have all heard about Unilever, that has pioneered sustainability-linked innovation. It's really very much within each of their products. They want to be responsible for the carbon footprint labels, but also ethical sourcing. So that ESG is part of the brand for that company and their products. It's their brand identity. So that's how they have really demonstrated how they can link a brand identity and serve as a business growth catalyst. Patagonia as well, I'll just mention it here, but I would like to, with Patagonia is quite important really because ESG is at the core of not only of the identity, but they also donate a large number of their profits to climate and other causes. So it's demonstration of how, this activism and clear commitment is not, is not contrary, does not disturb necessarily the business value and the profit making. But just the opposite, it enhances it. Now, some projects that I have worked on in Bulgaria, this is Sofia Med. So Sofia Med is a large copper producer, manufacturer. We've worked with them to develop their corporate climate action plan and to develop a low carbon pathway for this industry, for the country and for the region, which significantly reduced emissions, and it helped reduce the kind of carbon emissions by 22%. In 5 years down the line in comparison to 2022. So that's a business now that is a regional leader who is working on its decarbonization, and it's passing on these commitments to their supply chains as well. The other one here, which is Tunisia, is the first company that I started working on their climate strategy 5 years ago. This is a state-owned oil and gas incumbent, I would like to stop here, in an emerging market. Market that didn't have any regulatory pressure, didn't have, at that time, also not much pressure by investors, didn't have the data, available to make this kind of shift. However, through a very close engagement with their senior management, also aligning other institutional investors, we helped them develop their first sustainability strategy, integrate ESG into the core of their strategy, and set a target of 30% investment in renewable energy and reducing their carbon footprint. So that's when ESG works without any regulatory pressure. And I mentioned also Turkey Renaissance. I'll just briefly mention it, that this is a healthcare infrastructure leader in the country, in the region. We've worked with them as well on ESG integration and measuring their carbon footprint. We've gone through a very interesting exercise to identify what are the material carbon footprint for the company, but also the ones that is within their control, which is Scope 1 and Scope 2. But then how can they influence Scope 3? I think this is a very interesting exercise that has to be shared more widely, because it is a process of actually becoming, as we mentioned, working in clusters with your suppliers, with your business leaders, and helping them also improve on their carbon reporting. And now the Renaissance is preparing for their first sustainability report in line with ISSB. So we can move on to the next slide. So I wanted here to make a reference also to technology, as Andres mentioned, and also AI. AI seen as the ESG power multiplier, because in reality we're talking about transition, we're talking about transformation relying on data and on behavior change. In order for that to be fueled really by information and by reliable data, the ESG intelligence is best kind of served by technology and AI. So the good side is that AI can help turn ESG data that at times, I mean, everything that I mentioned, it's not easy, right? ESG data is messy, it's scattered, it's unreliable. We cannot do it without technology. And AI can help, and we are looking at now new businesses that extract insights from new business models, like extract these insights from satellite imagery, from audit or corporate reports, and they turn those dry data, PhD formats, into dashboards that could be useful, that could be actually fueled into provide the insights to the company. So not really do it manually, but the functions to be empowered to look beyond the manual data gathering, into the insights, into what is driving transformation, into foreseeing what will be the possible problems or failures, and take measures to mitigate them. So what does AI bring to the table really? It's first is automated data collection. These are just examples, of course. Some of them we have seen, others we are dreaming, that would be available soon and not too costly, and not, of course, also taxing on energy supply, which was something I'll come to it. So AI streamlines ESG data collection through these business units. And really what we would like to see is the functions to be enabled, to be not to when we started discussions with a company, not to hear, oh, this is complex, this is costly, we don't have this information, but actually to use AI to create value for the companies. AI models also dynamically benchmark companies' disclosures against evolving standards. I mentioned that if you have the data, you don't need then to start producing a new PDF, a new report. AI could capture that data. Technology could make you compliant or market leader in various jurisdictions. What we also have seen in some companies is how technology, when it's embedded, not only helps assess what is materiality, but it helps identify and support dynamic materiality assessment, right? Because we are living in an unprecedented world that it's changing. Yeah? There is a shift in one direction, in the other. So dynamic materiality is important, not done on an annual basis, but done regularly. And risk forecasting and scenario planning. It's really here how advanced technology models could simulate climate transition risks, and how they can help companies forecast, how they can run scenario analysis, how they can prepare them for possible future events that are not here now, but businesses need to build resilience in order to operate in a changed world. Now, of course, what I wanted here to mention is that this is not, of course, only positive and future-oriented. It's very much we have to understand that technology relies on energy, and it's it's fast developing. It provides a lot of opportunities. Some compare AI on the kind of gold treasure in the mountains, but then you have to go through a pond full of crocodiles, right? So we are just starting in this journey. Financial Times has reported recently that AI data centers in the US already demand 15 gigawatts of power annually. which is the capacity of all US solar farms, right? So we're talking about being sustainable, we're talking about AI. How are they converging? Are they enhancing each other, or are they actually, do you see it as a problem? And here I would like to mention that, yes, at the moment, we cannot agree that 100% adopting AI without thinking that AI has to actually be responsible. Using AI, the way that technology giants are using it, Google, Microsoft, has to be responsible. So Google, Microsoft, they have not met their targets on sustainability and renewable energy investments in order to kind of decrease their energy consumption and to make up for the AI and technology consumptions, but they're clear on their commitments that they will continue investing. This is the direction that they are going. So it is not only being intelligent here, it's about being responsible, and also about being socially responsible, which is very, very important for AI, as it also touches on the S dimension, as we've seen, because inevitably it will create losses, but it will also create new job opportunities. So with this, really, I just wanted to conclude by saying that the way we are at the bank where I'm working, we're very much focusing now on helping our businesses transition to a low carbon and resilient economy. We are with them to help them the transformation, so identify what is integral, what is material for them in ESG, so how they can actually change also or adapt their business models. And it's also about reinvention, right? It is really about looking ahead, what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, how you cannot, as a business alone, but find your aligned business partners or investors or business associations and material suppliers and work with them for this kind of future world that we all want to live in. So with this, I would like only to say 3 concluding remarks. We don't know each other, but if you are a business leader, make ESG part of your value strategy. If you are in tech, build the tools that help us solve sustainability at scale. And if we are in finance, we're moving investments where we see impact, where we can help realize impact, but also where we see that impact and innovation interact. Thank you for your attention.
Vessi, thank you very much. This space was intended basically for open up a discussion. I think your presentation was super interesting, but I would like to give you the chance to do a Q&A. Do you have any questions?
Just one. So I can do a bridge with the next discussion. I totally agree with you, and but let me change just a little bit the perspective. How long time it will take that sustainability in a value strategy will be a real key differentiator for a consumers? Which is your thing?
Very good question. I'll come to you with data.
I read a lot of research from Harvard, from McKinsey, from PwC, and I have in my mind around 60 is not so brilliant. Thank you for brilliant. But the point is, I saw some experiment in Denmark, in Coop Denmark, where they communicate on the shelf the CO2 consumption of a product that you have to buy, that you can buy. They start with some educational engagement of consumers with an app. So when you do your shopping, you know exactly how much CO2 you put in your cart. But the point is, when this kind of process will be general and improve competitiveness on sustainability, so in this way, sustainability will be a driver in value strategy. This is my idea. And I would like to understand more.
Thank you. I think this is what we're all struggling with, because we don't believe, and that's why also the Commission has stepped back, that regulation should drive the way. Regulation is not really kind of a driver for sustainability. It should be led by businesses, and businesses listen to their investors and to their consumer, right? So there is, as you mentioned, there is scattered data. I would say that there is data that kind of, I would say probably it's more in the developed world. Yeah? I think that we have to also make this distinction that 10% of the, I think it's McKinsey's data, 10% of users or consumers are, sorry, what was it? It was 46% of consumers in developed world are willing to pay 10% more for products if they're sustainable.
Yeah, the same PwC.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
something
The same by
yeah.
PwC say that the people is available to spend 9.7% as a premium price for a product with a real declaration of sustainability.
Well, I think this is already changing the mindset, right? Because it already gives a signal to the businesses that if they want to be competitive, if they want to grow, they have to invest now. They have to invest in those, as we mentioned, because sustainability is quite a broad notion, but identify what are those that actually material, meaning that those that are likely to also cause certain losses down the line, right? In addition to kind of broader sustainability, right? So I think this is important because then it's easy to convince the financial people, right? You are preemptively, or you are actually taking measures now in order not only to increase your competitiveness, in order to have a larger scale, a larger market share, but also to avoid losses down the line. Now, consumers' preferences depends on many factors.
Yeah,
On markets, development, on purchasing power, on information. I think this is very important, or misinformation, which is massive now. And then I think here, everyone and investors, but also each of us, depending on our roles, has a role to play. So we've also supporting some grassroots initiatives like Chapter Zero and others that are focusing on decision makers in order to help kind of change a bit the dial and raise awareness. But it's a process. So I don't think we have a data, but yeah. What I have seen is that climate change is not going away. It is becoming much more intense. It's becoming much more difficult to insure in emerging markets. So it's a matter really of bringing this information, making people also more aware, and also policymakers, right, thinking not only about their re-election cycle of every 4 years or whatever, but thinking about their children as well.